Hi, this is Randy Spivey from CPPS. And my team asked me to make a few comments related to workplace violence prevention as it relates to a healthcare environment. And so several years ago, actually, I was sitting at my desk in my office in Spokane, Washington, and on my computer screen, it pops a news alert saying there was an active shooter going on at a hospital just several blocks from where I was sitting. And then after a few moments, another alert comes up saying that the shooting was done, the situation was under control. Well, what had happened was there was a guy that was married and his wife worked in the hospital, and he walks into where she works and he pulls out a gun and shoots and kills her, and then he turns the gun on himself and kills himself. So in the follow-on investigations, what they found was that this individual was known to be a concern, and police had responded several times where he was making threats either against other people or against himself. In fact, the month before this shooting took place, his wife was feeling threatened and felt like he was suicidal. And so she called the police and they showed up and they took his gun away from him. Well, fast forward a couple of weeks later, he's in his office and she's no longer living with him, I don't believe. And he starts to become very unruly, starts making threats. His coworkers are concerned about his own safety and others' safety. And so they called the police. The police showed up to his workspace and confront him, and they don't arrest him, but they did a follow-up and basically gave him a warning. Well, somewhere and somehow that same day, he got a notification, I think it was from a different agency of law enforcement that took the gun away from him, and he was able to go back and actually get it and pick it up. And nobody let the woman know that had filed the concern and called the police to begin with that, hey, the guy picked his gun back up. And so the very next day is when he goes into her workspace and shoots and kills her. So a few things related to this, some takeaways. Number one, when you look at workplace violence, we don't make a lot of black and white statements. We're in this training now for 20 years. We just don't make a lot of black and white statements about anything. But one that I feel that we can make is that it's impossible to have an effective workplace violence prevention program, whether it's in healthcare environment or just a regular workspace, and have an effective violence prevention program without taking head on the issue of domestic or intimate partner violence. And the reason is twofold. One is the prevalence. 1 out of 3 women either have been, are in, or someday will be in a domestic violence relationship. It happens to men also, but not as frequently. And the second is the potential lethality. If you talk to law enforcement professionals and ask them the one type of radio call they don't want to show up to, invariably it's going to be domestic disputes. Sometimes the individual that calls the police when they start to arrest and pull away the perpetrator or the assailant, the people that called the police turn on the police and start hitting them and yelling and screaming at them. And it's very volatile. And so you combine that with a specific environment in healthcare, about over 16 million, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so over 16 million women work in a healthcare and social support environment. And so if you think about that, and the statistics are 1 out of 3, there are tens of thousands of women every day that are currently in a domestic violence environment. And so it's critical in a healthcare environment that organizations take on full head of steam the issue of domestic violence without meddling in people's personal business, but by acknowledging that we realize this is here. We realize statistically that we have people involved in it. And because we're trying to protect and help to protect the individual that's involved in this, at a minimum, they're very distracted. Worst case scenarios, their lives could be at risk. And we try to protect and help them, but what else are we trying to protect? Well, the entire working environment, as was its case in the shooting there that I gave the example of earlier. And so that can only be done when individuals feel a freedom that without retribution, they can come forward and share that they're involved in this type of relationship, this type of abuse, so that the organization can come around them, give support, and add in enhanced security measures if needed, particularly during that time when the person that's being abused has said, I had enough and I'm going to leave this abusive relationship. And the likelihood of them being killed during that first couple of weeks goes up dramatically. And so particularly if that's the case, and by the way, the statistics show they go in and they go back in the relationship, they leave and go back and they leave, they go back somewhere around 8 times before they finally said I had enough and they leave it for good. So for a healthcare environment, because of the percentage of women that work in that environment, and the reality is we see about a third, 35% or so workplace shootings like happened at that hospital that I was sharing with earlier. About a third of those are coming out of a bad relationship at home, an abusive relationship where they come into the workplace looking for their significant other and wind up shooting up the place. So those are a couple thoughts, particularly as it relates to intimate partner violence and domestic violence, on how to keep our workplaces safe, particularly in the healthcare environment where you have such a large percentage of the workforce being women. All right, thank you.